Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. My guest today is Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity, an international speaker, publisher, and 23-time #1 bestselling author. After reimagining her own life in midlife, Cathy discovered a powerful truth. Authorship and community can be catalysts for leadership, impact, and legacy. Through her multi-author book projects, retreats, and vibrant community, Cathy has helped more than 200 women step into authorship, expand their visibility, and lead from a place of purpose. Welcome to Expressions of Leadership, Cathy. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Now, Cathy, your original career was in medical genetics, really deeply meaningful and potentially emotionally intense work. What initially drew you to that field?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I actually like to say that I've been a biologist since the age of 3. So as soon as I was old enough to decide what I was interested in, it was always about living things. And I always had collections of all kinds of little critters in my room. And so I think it was that curiosity and that interest about life in general. And just so, of course, I went to university, did biology and genetics. And for me, part of it too is the magic of life. To me, genetics really represents a magic that we'll never quite understand. And so to me, I think that's part of it. And the work that I was doing was mainly in clinical diagnostic genetics. So in that way too, doing a service that's really helping people make decisions in life, helping them create more understanding of their own situation and what their potential is, whether it's children or their own health and that kind of thing. So it was definitely that combination.
And you also said that while you loved genetics and science, the culture that you were in at the time became toxic. What did that environment teach you about how leadership should not show up?
Yes. No, and it was an interesting combination because the manager that I worked directly under, he was actually great. He was very flexible. He was, making sure everybody was happy, things were working well. It was the doctor above him that was the real problem. And she was just one of those people that felt that for her to maintain power, she needed to keep everybody down as far as possible. So when you're working in an environment like working in clinical genetics, those people are well educated, they're curious, they're outgoing, they're there because they love the field of genetics and diagnosis. And so really the doctor we worked under had this mentality that we needed to all just stay small, don't be curious, don't ask questions, just do what's right in front of your nose, and that's it. And definitely that created a lot of frustration in the group. And here you've got people who want to learn, they want to be curious, they want to ask questions, and to have that completely stifled really just set a negative tone for all of us. And so that really taught me that that is not a productive way to be a leader. Like she could have got so much more value out of that team if she had encouraged questions. One of the other places that I had worked in that field was the opposite. So we would regularly have meetings where we would discuss different cases. We would have, continuing education. We would, to build that curiosity and to build that interest in what we're doing. So I had seen both sides of, how can you manage this kind of work situation? And yes, it definitely taught me that stifling people's curiosity and their interest in what they're doing is the reverse, the opposite of what you really want to be doing in any kind of environment, workplace or community or family.
And in that environment where curiosity was encouraged, what were the impacts of that?
Mm. I would say it really made people feel that their input was valuable. And also, again, when you're working in a field like that, that does require new information, new exploration. Things were always changing. There was always new things coming up. And I think being curious helps you to take on those changes and take on new information. And so really that environment created a group that they worked well together as a team. They were, even asking each other questions and supporting each other on our learning journey and what we were doing next. So it's just a completely different environment. With the positive setting, people wanted to work there. People wanted to come to work. People wanted to go to the group meetings. Whereas in the other environment, people didn't want to come to work. I could literally feel my body seizing up as I walked. Like I used to park up on the hill and I'd walk down to work, and I could feel my body tension changing with every step coming down that hill, walking in that door. And that was one of the reasons I finally decided to just leave that environment, 'cause I knew that not only from my mental health point of view, but from my physical health, that job was killing me. And I thought, life is too short. I am out of here.
And was there a specific moment when that became more than a phrase, life is too short, and turned into a decision?
Well, I would say that probably that final straw that broke the camel's back was really on my personal life side. I had also been living in a marriage that was very toxic and abusive, had two teenagers, coming through all that stress of that family dynamic as well. And in 2008, we were involved in a fatal car accident. So luckily, my family was physically okay, obviously very traumatized, but the guy on the motorbike that T-boned us at 100 miles an hour, he was not okay. And he was my age, so think I was around early 40s at that time. And to see, this guy in the blink of an eye, he went from a guy having fun out on the highway on his motorbike to a guy who's gone. And I think that was really where the light went off in my head, that, what, that's all it takes. A second, and your life changes completely. And I would say that that was probably the moment that really got me starting on that journey of feeling like, okay, I've got to rethink my life. I've got to rethink my job, my family, my like what I'm doing with my life, and even figuring out, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this really my calling? And so I would say that was really the turning point in my life.
And then after leaving genetics, you knew that you wanted to impact women's lives in some way, but didn't exactly know how. What were the questions that you were asking yourself during that in between season?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely was an interesting journey, and as I kind of hit that knowing that life is too short and I need to just figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And it was funny, it was almost like just an intuitive message that came to me that really told me that I'm supposed to be doing something that was creating a true impact in the lives of women around the world. So I knew it was something big, something that beyond what I could explain at the moment. But of course, that message didn't come with any instructions. It was just really that. But it really gave me that strength to realize, both as a parent, that, the example I was setting of a family living in the abusive situation we were in, I thought, I'm getting out of this. I can't leave this as my family's, my kids' example of a family. I need to get away from that job that was just really negative and bringing me down in so many ways. And I describe it like I threw my life up in the air and reinvented it on the way back down. So got out of the marriage, left the job. And of course, with in a career like that, that's very specialized, there's not a lot of other places just to go work. So I left that whole career behind. And yes, it really was a journey of figuring out, okay, what am I here to do? What are the skills that I can bring? And at that time, I actually went into financial planning, thinking, well, this is how I can help women, because a lot of women, do say that they are challenged with their finances, understanding all these markets and investments and all those kind of things. And of course, that industry is very male dominated. So having more women in that industry is also really important. And so that, okay, this is how I can make that big change in my life. But I
Mhm.
did that for about 10 years and really came to the realization that the little box that you're really in that industry of what you can say, what you can promote, how you can present yourself was still not the right answer. So
I'm curious, what was it about impacting women in particular that was important to you?
I think part of that real calling was, yeah, at that time in my life, a lot of my friends were going through divorce and starting life all over again. And really, there was a lot of struggle and confusion about what am I supposed to do next? Like, what is this life supposed to look like? And I think that's a lot where that calling kind of came from, that feeling I've got so many people right here that I can see there's this need to for information or support and that kind of thing. And I think that's really where it came from.
Cathy, what I'm hearing is this pattern of listening closely to yourself, especially when something just no longer fits. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll dive deeper into how Cathy's time as a financial planner continued to shape and deepen her leadership philosophy and how it evolved from there. Don't go anywhere. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm joined by Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity, whose leadership journey spans science, finance, and now publishing and community building. You spent about a decade in financial planning with large institutions, and on paper, it looked pretty stable and successful. Yet, as you mentioned, it felt like you were living in a tiny box. As a leader and as a learner, what parts of your voice and growth or agency felt most stifled during that time?
I would say a big part of it was when I came to the realization that so much of our success with money is actually based on our relationship with money. So whether it's our family history with money, our inner feeling about money, our understanding, our limiting beliefs really about how successful can we be with money, how much money can we earn. And that's a whole part of success with money that the professional industry does not address. And working with the big investment companies and banks, there's a very specific list of you sell this, you talk about this, you present yourself like this. And there really was no room at all for that other conversation about, you know, let's look at what your challenges are with money. Let's look at what might be shifting your ability to step into a different situation in life. Because so many of us will find that we really, even though our goal will be to improve our financial situation, we often stay in the same kind of level of success, whether it's the same level of savings, whether it's the same kind of job type, income bracket, those kind of things. For people to make shifts out of that, there's a whole different understanding of what's impacting your success with money. And I would say, looking at, we've all heard stories of people that win the lottery. And you would think logically, if you win millions of dollars, you should be set for life. You shouldn't have to work anymore. You should be enjoying things. But the stats show us that the vast majority of people that win lotteries within a couple of years are broke. They're worse off than they were before they won the money. And to me, that's one of the biggest indicators of this issue around our inner settings and limiting beliefs about money. That literally, if we think that this is who I am with money, even if we win millions of dollars, we will come back to that. And so, uh, in a way, it's almost another example of a magic behind the scenes that we don't really understand. And if we just understood that little difference, it would change everything. So I would say that was one of my big things that I really couldn't address that part. There was so much about, you have 1 hour for a meeting, you're in, you're out, paperwork, everything, get out, move on. And so there really wasn't that room to have those conversations or to really shift someone's understanding about money.
And you talked about experiencing contradictions between leadership's messaging and the reality of how things were done day to day. How did navigating that gap affect you personally and professionally?
Yes, yes, that was definitely part of it as well. And yeah, the companies that I worked with, I would say, generally speaking, were amazing, great, well-run companies. And that, yes, we would often hear the people at the top that were setting the direction, who are, really coming up with the ideas of changes or how we're going to do things. They had amazing concepts of, team building, personal development, those kinds of things that really would make someone feel like my job is valuable. I'm welcome here. I have the tools I need to do a good job. But then by the time it got down to actually the branch level where people were, doing the jobs, it had been lost in translation and had really just come straight back down to numbers, 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 hit these number goals or it's not right. And which, I mean, I understand when you're running a business, you need to set goals, but if you've got a team of people who are feeling like they are not being heard, they are being run in circles and that sort of thing. And especially, I think going through COVID was one of the hardest parts too. We were working from home most of the time, and even though there was these initiatives to, help with people's mental health, to help with support in coming through these big things, when it came down to it, I would say we were actually being treated as if they were assuming we were watching TV all day because we're working from home. Meanwhile, in reality, we're working double time because we're dealing with new technology. We're helping, like a lot of my clients were, well, older ladies that lived in these old folks' homes or seniors' residences that they were literally locked in their room for weeks alone. So they'd be talking with us on the phone. We were like their escape. So really, we were working double time, doing our job and, serving our clients and being treated like, well, you must be wasting time because you're working at home. And I think that was one of the final straws that I just thought, you know what? I am not wasting my time doing this either. And that was definitely one of the things that got me thinking, okay, this is not the right answer to what I've been trying to do. This is not creating an environment where I am creating this true impact in the lives of women that I had, on this mission to find.
Now, I'd like to home in on a key piece of your leadership philosophy. And it's actually a belief that you and I share that leadership isn't about title or hierarchy, but about the role that we play wherever we are. How did that understanding develop for you?
I would say that it's probably something that has been developing in me over time and definitely, going back to those previous jobs where, leadership was variable. There was the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think, starting with those examples and seeing that quite often it wasn't the people with the title that were really the leaders. It was the people in the community that were stepping into that role of, we can fix this, we can do better, let's go here, let's do this. And so definitely realizing that it was really leadership is really about a behavior, a mindset, not about did you get the job that has that title. And as we've said that quite often people get that job with that title, but they're not leaders. That one of the really important features of a leader is that they're lifting the people around them. They're not just walking off in front and say, follow me. They're saying, hey, this is the direction we should be going. This is how I think this should be. And giving the people around them that feeling of your opinion matters, your contribution matters. Doing this together is what we're doing. To me, that is what powerful leadership is. When you're building that feeling in a group where they want to come with you, they want to be with you, they want to think, I want to learn from that person, I want to have them as my role model and my example. To me, that's really where leadership comes from. And that's why, in a few of my books, that's been one of the themes that the women have been sharing what their journey in leadership has been, and not just about the titles they've earned, but what have they done in their, whether they were, in a junior role as they worked their way up to more senior roles. And even when we look at community and family, leadership is so important on all of those levels. And I think we're seeing, especially now in community, how, leadership has become questionable in a lot of areas. And it's really caused the populations to become scattered. People need to know who the leader is, and they need to know that the leader is creating a safe space for them. They're not just going off in a different direction, or standing up with a sign in their hand, but they're creating a safe space for other people to come into. And so yes, it's definitely been a big part of my journey, and recognizing who is a leader and who is creating that safe, positive space for others to be in.
Now, as of this month, it will be 5 years since you left to go out on your own. What did walking away require emotionally and practically?
Well, it definitely was a big decision, because obviously when you've got a good job that's got a good salary and good benefits and all those kind of things, to walk away and know that all of that will just disappear. And also the big part of not being really, really clear on exactly what my business was going to be. Because even then, I still had that core message that I'm going to create an impact in the lives of women around the world, but still not exactly sure what that was going to look like. And so my first thought was I would do a coaching kind of thing, like money coach, life coach, kind of blending what I had done previously. And after a few months of working in that kind of area, I realized this still wasn't the right answer. Like there was just something in my heart that told me this is not exactly what I'm still supposed to be doing. And so I would say a lot of it too was really listening to my intuition, and really continuing to be curious and observing, okay, does this feel like the right thing? Is this, using all the skills that I have? And luckily, when I went into that entrepreneurial starting stage, I did go in with letting myself have some flexibility around, what is this going to look like? What are the skills I'm bringing to this? Where am I taking this? So it definitely was a big, difficult decision to step out. But I would say a big part of that too was kind of when I left medical genetics as well, that understanding and knowing that I'd gotten to a point of, I guess, burnout, that I could again tell that my mental health, my physical health, my family dynamics were being impacted by the negative side of that job. And that really was, again, one of those deciding factors that, again, life is too short. I'm not going to continue to work in this world that's impacting all the different levels of my life. And so really, taking on the courage to just step out.
And what was it that gave you that courage? Because a lot of people, when they're in burnout, they just sit in that burnout because they're too afraid of the unknown.
Yes, yes. And I do stop and think back about, how did I do that? And people ask me that all the time. That, like, how did you do that? Like you said, that most people just would stay stuck in that. And a lot of it I give credit to, when I was a kid, we moved a lot. And so I had to get used to walking away from something and starting all over again, and walk away again, start all over again. And so I kind of had this inner faith in myself that I knew I could start all over again. I could figure it out. And so I think that that's a lot where my strength in that comes from, just that trust in myself, and I will figure it out.
Let's take another short break. And when we return, we'll talk more about Cathy's journey into authorship and publishing and how everything changed from there. Stay with us. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about people. The Forward Project helps organizations cultivate strong, adaptable leaders who create thriving workplace cultures. If you're ready to invest in your leadership team, visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn how. You're listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, here with Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity, exploring how leadership evolves when we listen to what makes us come alive. In 2019, you turned to writing and contributed a chapter to a book on emotional intelligence. What prompted you to turn to writing at that point?
It was kind of interesting because I had really never had that, it wasn't on my bucket list to become an author. I had never thought of myself as a writer or even creative in any way. And so at that point, it really was, that was when I was working in financial planning. I'd come through that first complete career change, got my kids out of that toxic family environment we were in. And it was kind of like the dust had just settled on all of that. And it was literally like a calling. This There was a local group of women here that had been doing books for a while, so I was aware of their books, but again, never felt this was something I needed to do or that would be part of my life. And when they did come up with that one title, so emotional intelligence, mental health matters, there was just something in me that my story needs to be in that book. And it literally was like a calling that I couldn't say no. I couldn't stop it from happening. I had to go through with this. And that's when I did decide, okay, I will be in that one book. I had no plans of doing more books. I just thought, okay, I need to get this story out there. And really with that feeling that my story could help other women that were going through similar things. And so that's where it all started, that that one story, that one chapter, that one book. And next thing you know, so literally it's been just over 5 years, I guess about 6 years now that I've been involved in this. And as you mentioned in my intro, that so now I've got 23 books that I've participated in, so written a chapter. And many of those were other people's books. So to date, 9 of those are my books that I've created and brought out in the world, and the rest are all other people's books. So I've worked with, I'd say, over a dozen different publishing groups. Every book's got a different theme, and it's just kind of evolved into something you never saw coming.
And as you said, in this time, you were also navigating so many different things, this career change. You were still raising 2 teenagers. You were navigating this divorce. What was it at that time when you had all of this going on that helped you to decide, yeah, my story is really important and can help others, so I need to get it out?
I think part of it kind of goes back to when I first made that change in my career, that feeling that there's so many women that were going through big life changes, and how do we help each other? How do we support each other in this journey that we're all on? And I would say that was kind of where my starting in books came from as well. Just that knowing that we need to lift each other, support each other, share our journey. And I definitely believe, and I think especially as women, that we learn so much from each other's stories. And whether it's going through our own life changes, whether it's, struggling with a health problem or a community problem or a family problem or a work problem, I think just knowing other stories of what women have come through, how they've come through things, really does help lift all of us.
Now, as you said, you initially thought, I'll write one chapter and that's it. And then, of course, it led to 23 number one best-selling books. What changed?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and it was funny because I would say so after that first book was when then COVID arrived, and the next couple of books that group of women was doing was kind of around how we were surviving COVID. And so the next book that they were doing, it kind of was like I was mentioning while I was working as a financial planner, while everybody else was living in this quiet little bubble, I was working double time. And so I really felt called to share that story as well. And I really described it really like, I was in this storm that, everything's flying around me and I'm just holding on in the middle, trying to survive. And, that everybody else is looking to me to lead the way and help them through that. And whether it was my family and like I said, all these clients of mine, it wasn't just that they were alone. The financial markets were crashing, people were losing their jobs, nobody knew what was happening next. So it literally was, I was in this hurricane of just people looking to me to be that strong pole in the middle. And so that was the second book that I was involved in was that one. The one thing I love about these books is that everyone opens doors that you didn't even see before. And I think that's how I started kind of moving into doing more and more books and then stepping into other communities and you get invited into different speaking opportunities, different summits or conferences or other books or other podcasts. And I think that's what really got me kind of hooked into this whole world was just these doors started opening up and these opportunities started presenting themselves that I hadn't even thought of before. So I had, at first thought that I would do more of that, like I mentioned, coaching thing, money coach, life coach kind of thing. But as all these other doors started opening, you see opportunities and possibilities that you never even thought of.
It's walking through those doors of possibility. You kept seeing them open and you just kept walking through them.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you ever imagine that this is what it was going to turn into when you first left the financial planning world?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And but it's kind of become interesting. And when I do kind of look back on how those stages went, and I think trusting my intuition was also a big part of that, of, going back to that feeling of what feels like the right answer, what feels like the right opportunity next. And sometimes it goes against logic. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago, if I was going to get into publishing, be an author, all these things, I would have laughed at you because there was nothing anywhere in my journey that would have, pointed in this direction. So it really was about trusting and following my intuition on, okay, no, I'm going to go this way. Now this feels right. Now this feels like a different opportunity. And even, I think I was working on my fifth and sixth book, again, with other people and other people's communities, other people's books, when it really, when I did, again, almost get that intuitive hit of this is what you're supposed to be doing. You are supposed to be creating these opportunities to give other women these opportunities to become published authors in a way that is welcoming, safe, supportive, professional, well done. And yeah, it really just came to me. This is it. This is what you're supposed to be doing.
And what did you see that maybe other people didn't see yet that authorship could be a leadership platform?
I think part of it for me was, again, going back to story and how stories really help the reader to step into new opportunities and possibilities. I think giving people an opportunity to become a published author through sharing their stories and their words of wisdom kind of leads the reader in a direction that they might not have seen before either. And what I've seen also with my authors is that for many of them, this is, with my books, they are often their first step into publishing and writing. And they often come to it with this feeling that, oh, nobody really wants to hear my story. My story's not important enough, or like, who wants to hear what I have to say kind of idea. And then to walk them through this process where now they can share their wisdom and their story. They are now a published author. They've got their book in their hand. There's this feeling of, wow, I didn't think I could ever do that. Now I've done that. And it triggers this feeling of what else is possible. My story is important. Others do want to hear it. I can create impact in other people's lives. And just that feeling of, okay, now what can I do? What's next for me? How big can I go? I just find that it just opens up this feeling of big, going bigger, going wider, increasing that feeling of the impact that you can create in the world.
Why was it important to you that women didn't have to do this alone?
I think a big part of it was that I could see that so many women did want to share their story. They did want to become published authors, but they were really holding themselves back with those feelings of imposter syndrome and that nobody wants to hear their story and that I'm not an author. And it was almost like a knowing that by giving them a way to do this that is really done for you. So writing their chapter, about 4 pages, is all they have to do. The rest of it, they're in community, they're working together, they're connecting with each other, collaborating, building friendships. And then, together we're going through on this journey. So it really does take you into something. I think that's part of what helps to come through that feeling of something you didn't think you could accomplish and now you have, because you're doing it together. You're doing it as a community, and you're doing it in a way that's, building visibility on a lot of different levels for what you're doing, what your opportunities are, and that kind of thing. So I would say that was a big part of it, just that being in community and doing it in a way that is you're really supported.
There's something really powerful about how you turned a personal leap into this collective opportunity. We're going to take another break, and when we return, we'll talk about that community and visibility and redefining leadership, especially for midlife women. Stay with us. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and my guest today is Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity, whose work is helping women step into authorship, visibility, and purpose-driven leadership. You've helped over 200 women become published authors. What do you see change most dramatically when women claim that title of author?
For a lot of them, it is that feeling of stepping into new possibilities, but a lot of it too is, what they can do with their business. I would say the majority of women who participate in my books are entrepreneurs, and of course, always looking for new ways of building visibility, getting their word out there. And by participating in a book and actually becoming a published author and being able to put that in your profile and to have the word author, whether it's on your LinkedIn or your Facebook or your websites, just that word in itself puts you in a different category. So I know that a lot of people who are organizing summits or conferences or even podcasters will often look for that word author in people's profiles as a way of differentiating them from other people. And so that in itself is a big shift. I think the expanding community that comes with the books is another way that women have really expanded what they're doing and expanded that feeling of where can they take things next.
And why do you think visibility is so critical for leadership as a lever, especially for women?
I would say for those of us who are entrepreneurs, that visibility is really that first step in getting our name out there, getting our reputation out there. I think our reputation and the branding is a really big part of it. And really, one of the things I love with these books is that each author is sharing their own personal journey, what they've come through, what they've learned along the way. And then for most of us who are entrepreneurs now, what we're doing is where our life has led us. It is us following our passion and our experience and what we've done. So really reading that chapter builds that know, like, trust because now the reader, they know a bit about you, what your journey has been, what you feel you've learned along the way, and then leading it into some tips or tools that would include what they're doing for their business. So whether they're a coach that helps women in transition, whether they're an accountant that helps people do their taxes, whether they're a business coach that helps people develop their business, that gets wrapped into that chapter because how did they get there? What did they learn along the way? And what are those tips or tools or strategies for the reader? So it really does build that connection between the reader and the author.
And how do you select the authors for each of your books? Because you include about 20 women per book.
Yes, yes, roughly 20 women. And well, a big part of it is the theme. So I find that, titles and themes almost call different people to them. And all of my authors, we go through a process like this where we have a conversation and I learn more about them and what their journey has been, and also learn more about what it is that they're promoting in the world. For some people, it is just the experience of sharing their story and leaving a legacy. And for others, like I said, a lot of it is around using it towards as an entrepreneur. And so the more I understand what their journey has been and what they're trying to promote or leave with their chapter, that helps me to fit them into different categories. And so, with most of my books, they're on themes that are quite broad. So, a couple of the ones that we've just published recently, one was Midlife Reimagined, another is Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities. Another was Women Transforming Leadership in Business and Community. So, as I kind of get a feel for their story and what they would like to promote with their story, I can decide which of those books, those titles, those themes, those categories would be a good fit for them. So it really, I find it's really helpful to have those different themes so it really can kind of pinpoint what people are trying to promote. Like one of my new ones is called From Inspiration to Success, the Entrepreneurial Journey. So with each of those chapters, that person is sharing not just their own journey, but their tips or tools that would help other entrepreneurs on their journey. So it's kind of a fun way of meeting amazing people and really helping them shape the direction of the visibility they're creating.
And how do you determine the theme?
Quite often there's ideas that kind of come to me based on just my conversation in the community. I'm involved in a lot of different networking groups. So, really hearing what are women talking about, what are the things that they are wanting to put out there in the world, and kind of different ideas come to me. It was the first book I did was called Embrace Courage. And it really was around sharing people's stories in a way that showed that courage wasn't just about, big things like running into the burning building to save the kids. Obviously that's very courageous, but really in everyday life, we are doing things that are courageous. And so using the stories of all these different authors to bring that example together. But it was kind of interesting too, because I think part of how I chose that title was that was the first book that I was setting out in the world, that going out, finding 20 people around the world. Would you like to be in my book with me? And so really it required a lot of courage on my side to even think like who wants to be in my book, why do I think I can put together a book that other people want to read, and so parts of it, different ones are my own life journey that I know others are on. And part of it is learning, listening to other people. People will quite often say, well, what about this theme? Or what about that idea? And like one of the new ones that we're just starting is called The Leader Within. And so that idea was, brought to me by another one of the women that had been in a previous book. And she's like, how about this title? And so that's where some of the ideas come from too.
And when you're publishing these books, you also have to be able to help guide them through the process, maybe give them some feedback. What does it look like in practice to empower people to make their own decisions and also give them honest feedback?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely been an interesting part of this journey. And it's kind of funny too, because it's really kind of led me to understand better what my skills are at a core level. And that's what I've come to realize that one of, some of my real core skills, it really is around creating safety, making people feel welcome, making people, building their feeling of what's possible for them, building that feeling of, yes, what I have to say is important. And a big part of that, really is around coming together in conversations like this and sitting with people and having them share their stories. And quite often I will sit with a woman and she'll come to me and say, well, I got nothing in my story that's really important. What would I say if I was in a book? And, we'll just have even a 10-minute conversation and I'll say, well, what about this? You went through that. Like, don't you think that other women would love to see that example of how you came through that life situation, that career situation? And it's amazing how the conversations really kind of can help people bring out their own strength and their own understanding of what their journey has been. So it's been kind of interesting to kind of discover these things as part of what are my superpowers.
We're going to take one final break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the future Cathy's building and the legacy she hopes to leave. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm back with Cathy Derksen, founder of Inspired Tenacity, as we look ahead to what's next and the legacy that she's shaping. Cathy, as you look ahead, what's your vision for the future of Inspired Tenacity?
Yes, yes, it's definitely been something I've been thinking a lot about, with the new year coming on and everything, and what does the next few years look like? And I definitely know that the books are my core program that really helps women on so many different levels. But now I'm starting to build other, like with retreats and that kind of thing. And one of the things I'm really working on going forward too is creating more of a community that really is focused on helping midlife women to come together in ways that they can start seeing their own potential. And I think our culture has really told women in general, after the age of 50, you're old and obsolete, and you should just go sit in the corner because no one needs you anymore. And my big passion really is helping just snap us out of that, get us into realizing that we are just getting started. And now is the time for us to be doing what excites and inspires us. And knowing that doing that both creates, role models for other women to do the same, but really is creating a spark of just positive energy that I think is really what feeds the world. And so that really is kind of more like the bigger picture of where I'm going, is really creating more of this bigger community where we are coming together and we are like really shifting the world together, I guess, is the bottom line.
So, taking it beyond just the storytelling and really making it into more of a movement.
Yeah. Exactly.
And what kind of legacy do you hope that this work leaves for the women that you serve and for the broader definition of leadership?
Yeah, I would say that, the big legacy, and obviously books are a wonderful way to leave a legacy. And one of the things I love about real books is they're forever. You can pick up a book that was written 100 years ago, and you know, it is still a book with all the value that it had 100 years ago. And so for me, that's a big part of the legacy. But really, the big part to me is really around that stepping into possibility and being that role model for other women to, because I mean, as we've discussed, I mean, I have completely changed my career. This is now the third career that I'm on, and just helping women see that yes, we can do this. Yes, we can, start all over again. And it's not about what we did in the past. It's not about, what other people think we should be doing. And so to me, that's the real legacy that I want to leave, both with women and, obviously my family. It's important as well to show them that, follow your heart, do what, make sure you feel good about what you're doing and that it's what you're supposed to be doing and that you're excited about. And so those are a few of my legacy pieces.
And for listeners who want to learn more or explore working with you, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah, so my website is inspiredtenacity.com. And on that page, you can find there's downloads of free PDF downloads of many of my books. There's information about my current book projects. And LinkedIn is the best social media to find me on. And I'm always open to hearing, book ideas, ideas of what you're doing in the world, and all those kinds of things. And I really believe that, collaboration and connection are an amazing way that women do work together. And so I'm always open to those kinds of ideas and connections. And so, yes, so the website and LinkedIn are the best places to find me.
Now it's time for our wisdom and whimsy segment of the show, where I get to ask the guest one advice question and one fun question. Let's begin with the advice question. What advice would you give to a midlife woman who feels the nudge that something more is possible, but isn't sure she's brave enough to listen?
Yes, definitely the advice that I love to give is to find your community. And you'll often find, especially for midlife women who want to do something different, that our immediate family and friends are not the ones who are going to encourage and give us any guidance. They are usually the ones that will tell us that, settle down, go back to what you're doing, you'll get over this. And so don't stop there. Reach out to a wider community. There are groups of women around the world who are here to be your family, to give you that support, to give you new ideas, and just even if you're not doing the exact same thing, just that feeling that we're doing something new together. We are supporting each other in our life journey. So that is a big piece of my advice. Find community outside of the groups that you would normally be in.
And now for the fun question. What's one thing your younger self would be very surprised to learn about the life that you're living now?
Well, I would say the things that my younger self would be surprised about with me now in my role as a writer and a publisher and creating books. I went through most of my life thinking I was not creative. My background in science and numbers and was, I mean, obviously that was part of where my brain liked to go, but also I think it was that I had been told as a kid that I'm not artistic, I'm not creative, I wasn't good at drawing or painting or those sorts of things. And so I think I had lived most of my life feeling like I'm not creative. And now when I look at my life, I realize everything I'm doing is based on my creativity. everything is built from scratch of my ideas and me supporting other people to be creative as well. So that's a huge part of it. And the funny twist also is that I'm actually dyslexic. So reading, writing, those were things that my whole life were not things that I tended to lean towards. They were things that were more difficult for me. They were things that I was never good at. And and so for me now to be focused on writing and publishing and helping other people get the word, like the written word, out in the world, for someone who's dyslexic, that was not a direction I saw coming either.
Well, Cathy, thank you for joining us on Expressions of Leadership and for sharing your story and your wisdom and your belief in what's possible, especially in midlife. What stands out is how, for you, leadership is not about taking up more space, it's about creating it for stories and courage and women to step into visibility on their own terms.
Yes, no, exactly.
Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
And to our audience, if this conversation resonated with you, please share the episode, follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also join us every Saturday and Sunday at noon on Radio Evolve Santa Barbara at radioevolve.rocks. You've been listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, inviting you to reflect on where you might be standing at the edge of a new chapter in your leadership journey. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.